This is not a technique channel. I want to build a way of talking about martial arts, and I want to borrow the language from a science that has nothing to do with fighting, the study of systems that change over time. This science was built to describe things like water turning into ice, but for 40 years, people who study how humans move have been using it, and almost nobody has used it to describe fighting, and I mean all of fighting, striking, grappling, standing on the ground, with one set of words. A system is something that you cannot understand by taking it apart. A fight is a system. The two bodies are connected so tightly that you cannot explain what one man is doing without looking at the other. So there is no what he is doing, there is only what the two of them are doing together. That's why I try not to describe only one man at a time in this video, because the sentence wouldn't mean anything. A state has to do with stability, and underground, stability comes from one thing: your post, your contact with the floor, or your base. Flat on your back, the floor is holding you. On your knees or on your feet, with your chest facing down, your knees, your feet, your hands are carrying you. Seated, your hips carry you. Those are the states I'm looking for. Shapes the floor holds for you. And to go from one to another, you have to give up contact to the floor. You have to create new posts. You cannot get from your back to your knees without taking something off the mat. And for a moment, you have less base than you had. That moment is where everything in this sport happens. So here's what you're about to see. Me in class explaining a game to my students in French with subtitles. Then I will show you what they did with it, and I will talk over their roles. Understand that in this game, one man has to change the state of the system. That's his goal. The other man has to stop him. That's the whole game. Please watch the transitions, not the techniques. If I had only the words of techniques to describe fighting, I think I would have very little to say about fighting.
Je vais vous montrer avec Charles Desrosiers. Donc, on va commencer torse à torse, au-dessus des épaules. D'accord? Donc, moi, ma tâche principale à travers tous les jeux qu'on va faire dans les prochaines 15 minutes, c'est de garder les épaules de mon partenaire et ses hanches collées au sol. D'accord? Donc, chaque fois que les épaules ou les hanches commencent à se déconnecter du sol, moi, je veux les ramener au sol et j'ai la contrainte de ne pas pouvoir connecter les mains pendant les 10 premières minutes. D'accord? Charles, de son côté, il doit être capable de relever ses épaules, de relever ses hanches. Et les conditions gagnantes pour lui sont d'aller à genoux ou d'aller s'asseoir, okay, pendant 3 secondes. Donc, si Charles peut tourner, aller sur ses genoux, okay, ou sur ses pieds, 3 secondes, c'est lui qui gagne. Okay? S'il tourne, il va juste s'asseoir. Okay, c'est lui qui gagne. Je vous rappelle, vous, votre tâche continue. C'est toujours amener les épaules puis les hanches du partenaire vers le sol pour l'empêcher d'aller à genoux, l'empêcher d'aller sur les fesses, et vous ne pouvez pas connecter les mains. D'accord? Donc ça, c'est la tâche de base, celle qui va mener à tout le reste. D'accord? À un certain moment, vous allez évoluer vers des conditions gagnantes différentes qui sont les suivantes. À un moment donné, Charles, pour gagner, ce ne sera plus suffisant d'aller à genoux ou de s'asseoir. Il va devoir se lever debout. Okay? Ou il va devoir m'encercler avec ses jambes. D'accord? À un moment donné, Charles, il va non seulement essayer de se lever, mais il va aussi essayer de faire des choses comme ça, des choses comme ça. Évidemment, s'il me renverse et il est rendu par-dessus moi, c'est comme s'il s'était levé. D'accord? Il est rendu par-dessus moi, il s'est levé, il est rendu par-dessus moi, ou il verrouille. À partir de ce moment-là, moi de mon côté, je vais essayer 2 choses. De venir encercler le cou de mon partenaire avec mon bras, puis ou lui mettre une main dans le dos. D'accord? Donc Charles, lorsqu'il essaie de verrouiller sa garde, ou il essaie de se lever, moi je vais essayer de faire des choses comme ça. Il met une main dans le dos, me disant qu'il s'en va à genoux pour se lever. Okay? Je vais essayer d'encercler son cou avec un de mes bras. D'accord? Et en fait, à la fin, là où vous pouvez aller, c'est pour le joueur qui cherche à se relever, vous pouvez ajouter les soumissions. Okay? Donc, vous ne faites plus juste nécessairement verrouiller, peut-être que vous renversez, peut-être que vous soumettez, peut-être qu'en revenant sur le dessus, vous passez la gamme, c'est vous qui choisissez ça. Okay? Mais je rappelle les tâches qui sont la base de toute la dynamique du jeu. Okay? Donc, gardez mon partenaire sur ses hanches, sur ses épaules, sans possibilité de connecter les mains. Le bras autour du cou éventuellement, la main dans le dos éventuellement, lui de son côté éventuellement se lever debout complètement ou enrouler avec les jambes. Okay? Vous avez 15 minutes pour évoluer à travers ces jeux-là. Dans le choix des partenaires, préconisez du monde à peu près de votre taille. Okay? On y va. 3, 2, 1.
This is a game we've been playing at my gym for 2 weeks. The design follows what Rob Gray calls the method of progressive constraints. I start with small task and the game grows as the player play with the task. One man's job is to change state. The other man's job is to stop the change of state. And as the bottom player starts managing the change of state, the top player begins threatening submissions to prevent him from sitting or getting to his knees. To keep the system where it started, the top player is looking to remove all posts. He brings his partner back to the ground, focusing on shoulders and hips. Here, the bottom player is a blue belt. He's a visitor. The top player is a purple belt from our gym. Watch the top player work the shoulders and the hips. And the bottom player wins this one. Here are 2 white belts from our gym, both relatively new. The top player focuses heavily on the shoulders first, then adjusts to control the hips. But as he commits to one, watch the other come free. The bottom player lifts his hip, gets to his side, and manages to get his legs inside. But this is interesting. The top player resettles the system by getting over the hip. And by doing that, he regains the chest-to-chest alignment. So here's my intention as a coach, and it's the whole reason I built the game this way. I don't want to give position as a winning condition. I don't want to say get to mount or get to 3/4 mount, because it's actually complicated to tell someone what exactly is mount. And what matters to me are processes of pinning, keeping someone to the ground. So I don't give them a place to go. I give them a change of state to produce and a change of state to prevent. 2 older gentlemen from our gym. Blue belt on top, brown belt underneath. Brown belt turns to his side. He gets his hips and shoulders off the floor, looking for a connection. We can see he's trying to change the state of stability on the ground. He's trying to head for his knees. But then the top player resettles the system, cover the hips, bring the shoulders back to the ground. This is a continuous game for him. The whole focus is to maintain a state, keep the system settled, or change it if you're on the bottom. 2 competitors from our gym. Blue belt underneath, purple belt on top. Now watch the top player use indirect control at the head and at the knee pit to bring the shoulders and the hips to the ground. That's his task and his solution. His job is to hold the system in this alignment. The bottom player is looking to create distance for the purpose of changing state, to get to his knees or to get to his butt, lift the shoulders or lift the hips. Now you can see the system becoming unstable, and the top player rushes to restabilize it, back to the connection at the head, using his head again to bring the hips down, then sagging his hips back to bring his partner back to the ground. And this is worth saying plainly. Pinning is not about just putting weight on someone. It is about connecting your partner to the mat. So that's me, and you should know that I already know how this game ends, so take my commentary here with that in mind. As he starts turning, I create a barrier in front of his knees. I make sure his knees cannot get over his hips. That's a focus I like to give myself when I'm focusing on pinning the hips. But as he gets his hips in the air, I look for the hip or the knee that's still below the hip line. And that's where I collapse him. By doing that, I stop pinning the shoulders, and that's exactly why he manages to sit. So at this point in the game, simply changing state, supine to seated or supine to the knees, is still a winning condition, because that's what establishes the dynamic that I want to see. Here are the same 2 guys we saw in the beginning. We see big leg movement, big leg motion to create off balance, and rotation to turn and lift the hips. But the top player grabs at the neck and sags his weight back. As the bottom player sags his butt back to the ground, he's probably expecting a hard rotation toward him. But as we know, changes of state usually come with vulnerabilities. And as he comes up, he lets go of his post on the ground, and that instability leads to a connection at the hip, which brings the system back to its settled position. Then, indirect control again, pinning of the wrist, pinning of the shoulders. 2 white belts fighting to maintain top position. Stabilize the system first, then get back to the task. Hips back to the mat, shoulders back to the mat. 2 white belts further along now in the game, still working to get to hips and shoulders back to the mat, but now they're threatening strangles too. Here's me again. I never want to stay on my back. That's the whole point of the task for the bottom player. We are trying to change state at all time. We are trying to lift our hips or our shoulders. So if I can't turn one way, I'll just try and turn the other way. And as I do that, my posts become available. I create vulnerabilities in myself. So while I'm doing it, I want to proactively control the limb that my partner will probably use to break my post. So this armpit grip is very hard to strip. And often it is just not available. So if I cannot get my shoulders moving, my body knows the hips are the solution. I have to get my hips in the air and protect my neck as I do that. And as I change state, we finish the game. 2 white belts. The top player is focusing heavily on the shoulders, keeping them on the ground. Then a transition to a crossface and a post behind the elbow. So now we should expect him to go at the hips, but watch, he is not able to maintain inside position between the hips and the knee. And I think there's hesitation there. Should I pin the shoulders or should I focus on the hips? And now we see what I was hoping the game would produce. Indirect control of the hips through leg pinning. Blue belt and purple belt. We start with some leg entanglement, always with the same focus, keeping hips and shoulders on the mat. We're about halfway through the game now, so they're probably looking for height or a connection to the neck or an isolated arm. But as the system breaks apart, both players stand up and both look to reconnect to the hips. The system settles again and the guys call it and start over. Our 2 white belts. The bottom player is on his knees and the game continues, which means that they are now further along the progression. The defending player is trying to get to his feet. The bottom player is carrying his opponent's weights on his post. So the top player's job should be to remove the post, which bring the shoulders and hips back to the mat. And that's what he does. Now they're back to connecting hips to the mat. And even when people use hooks for me are not an end in themselves. They're just a way to get the hips connected to the mat and to pin. Here's me again. I'm using my shoulder to prevent the rotation toward me. As my partner manages a half turn, I put pressure on his knee to bring his hips back to the mat, floating over him. Usually when I constrain locking the hands, I constrain locking the feet too. Once again, I keep the knees below the hips and stay very aware of how my partner starts building posts. Then I remove those posts and bring his shoulders back to the mat. Then as I connect to the neck, I create a curved spine, which brings the shoulders back down, then back at the hips. As I stand, I can put downward pressure and stabilize the system in the same alignment that we started with, always aware of the hips and the shoulders coming off the ground. And as I go to connect to the shoulders, my partner gets his hips in the air, and that's it. Our 2 young competitors. The bottom player has managed to change state, and now they're further along in the game. So as he gets on top, he can disengage or become the top player. And now he has to resettle the system. The system is not settled yet though. The 2 of them are fighting for the settlement. Can you consolidate the top position? Or can you resettle what was the alignment that we started with? And this heavy connection to the shoulders and this change of state from the bottom player who's about to become the top player is what creates the rotation and the new settlement. Watch the system settle. Good pinning of the shoulders, head covering the hips. The top guy has stood up and you should still be focusing on the hips. Now they've decided that they could connect hands, which is something we allowed during the last 5 minutes. Strong connection of the hips to the mat. From here, we should expect the bottom player to get his shoulders in the air. And the top player's job should be to remove pose to bring the shoulders back down. But as he brings the hips back to the mat, the arm is still on the ground as a post. And that's a vulnerability. So is the neck, which is not defended. But that's the consequence of someone trying to stand up. Here you see him choosing to attack the neck, connecting to the shoulders. And doing that, obviously, the hips now can rise. So that's what the defending player does, and that's how he escapes. Indirect connection at the elbow as a way to connect shoulders to the mat. Now, connection to the hips. I'm trying to get my elbow out, which lets me get inside position and start raising my shoulder. As I do that, my opponent brings my shoulders back to the mat and connects his arms to my arm. A change of state from my partner and destabilization of the arm. Same thing, the top player connects to the shoulders, focusing on pinning them, keeping them on the mat. And as the body is stabilized, the system settles again. Now the top player's job is to stabilize the arm, stabilize the supine state, and then we get the break. Our two competitors. A change to seated, then back to the knees. So the top player is changing state a lot, and that creates new opportunities for different entanglements. Then the system settles, stabilizes, and we get the tap. The further along we go in the game, the more submissions we see, and the more it starts to look like positional sparring. But this is not positional sparring, because during the whole game, the players have to keep the task in mind. I don't want them to revert to their normal attractors, the things they would do if they were just fighting for points. They have to open their eyes to newer opportunities that are brought along by the task of pinning shoulders and hips. Return the shoulders and hips to the mat. And if you're defending, get your shoulders and your hips off the mat. To disengage, to build height, or to just get on top and resettle. Watch the bottom player try to stand. I get to the neck, and the threat of the submission bring the shoulders back to the mat, covering the hip. Same purpose every time. Thanks for watching.